Hello friends, welcome to Kavita's classroom. And let's begin with the topic, the movement and shift in the demand curve. We left it here in our previous video. And again, the same request, do like, share and subscribe. So let's continue from the previous concept, and we had change in quantity demanded versus change in demand and movement along the demand curve or shift in the demand curve. Before proceeding any further, I would just take you back to this demand function which we have already studied. Demand of X is a function of price of X, price of related goods, taste preferences, income, and expected changes in the future prices, right? So the crux of the story is, I'm just making two circles here. This is the first one and this is the second one. And this is the phenomenon of movement. And this is shifting in the demand curve. Let's understand how and why. When the demand of a commodity changes on account of its own price, this is called movement along the demand curve. And when the demand of something changes on account of some other reasons, its own price is the same. So that is called shifting in the demand curve. Movement and shift. I'm just roughly making these two diagrams here. And these two diagrams are repeated everywhere in the next whole chapter, right? It's only a matter of labeling and that's it. Movement means demand curve is there and 2 points of reference are there. When the demand is increasing, so demand shows increase from this to this point, it means it's a downward movement. On the contrary, if the demand decreases, right? So it means the demand is going this side. So it's a movement upwards. That's why we call movement, because the change is shown on the same demand curve. Demand curve is the same. But when we say shifting in the demand curve, the price remains the same. The demand may change from this demand curve to this demand curve. This is called increase. And when there is a fall, we say the demand has reduced from Q to Q double dash. Right. So such is the diagram of shifting. Please make sure that you understand that shifting means altogether new change, new place of the demand curve is there. While in movement, the movement only talks about the different point of reference. Earlier, the demand was this A, now the demand is this B, and now is this demand C. Right. But here the movement means the demand is altogether shifted to right or to left. Right. So let's understand. It's a beautiful table given here. Change in quantity demanded. This is another name given to movement, and change in demand is the name given to shifting, right? Movement has got two concepts. One is the extension, the other is contraction, right? Contraction means reduction, extension means increase, enhancement, right? Here it is called decrease in the demand curve, and here it is increase in the demand curve, right? So what is the reason? Here the reason is the price itself, and here the reason are the other factors. So let's understand how the price would be behaving when extension means the demand is increasing, it is enhancing, it's on downward movement, right? So what would happen means the prices would have fallen, and here the prices would have gone up. Here you can have the other things like decrease in demand happens when the income decreases in case of normal goods, or your taste and preferences fall down, right? On the contrary, income increases and the taste and preferences are for that commodity, right? So when you are giving such a table, only the addition of one schedule and curve would suffice for good 4-marker difference, right? The diagram has already been made here. So change means we make this type of diagram where two demand curves are there. It's only a matter of labeling. If we are to show it increase, I'll show it this way, means rightward shift. The points of reference would be A and B, and the quantities would be Q and Q dash. Price remains the same. But had it been the decrease, I would have shown it this side, and this is the point of reference and this is the quantity. But this diagram, only one demand curve is shown, right? This is the initial point of reference. With the fall in price, there is downward movement, that is extension. And with rise in price, there is upward movement, that is contraction. Right? And when we talk about the schedule means with the price and quantity. I'll show it. When price moves from 1 to 2, the quantity moves from 2 to 1. As simple as this, right? And when you're talking about this schedule, you simply say price had been 2 only, but the demand has gone from 10 to 15. So we show no change in prices in case of increase and decrease, but we do show the change in prices in case of contraction and extension, right? So now whatever has been told to you would be given briefly in a fast mode. Extension means we have to show increase in the value, right? Rise in the quantity demanded. So 1 to 5, from 5 to 1. So this is the schedule, this is the curve you would talk about when it is happening on account of its own prices. So these are the three things, fundamental things you have given. Okay, contraction means other things remaining the same, rise in own price. So how it behaves, from 5 it becomes 1, and now the contraction happens. We do call it upward movement. Upward movement, because the quantity has contracted from 5 to 1. Now, increase and decrease. Again, as I told you, the price has to be the same, but the quantity is showcasing a rise, right? And we say when more of a quantity is purchased at its existing price due to other factors, because of other factors. Right. So this is the definition, this is the schedule, and this is the curve when price is shown to be one constant line parallel to x-axis, and the increase is shown by rightward shift. On the contrary, when decrease is being talked about, this would be showing a leftward shift, right? Now the cases of increase in demand curve. Increase or the rightward shift. When would it be? The income increases, it is talked about for normal goods, right? Because for inferior goods, if the income increases, we would show a negative shift, right? When the price of substitute goods increases and for complementary goods it falls, and the tastes and preferences are in favor, and the availability of the good is expected to reduce in the future. So what would you do? You would buy it more. So there would be increase in the demand, right? And all decrease in the demand. A decrease, how do we define? We define that when less of a commodity is purchased at existing price because of the factors other than its own price. So this is how we define it. How do we give the schedule? The same price but the reduced value. And how do we show the curve? Similar, the price line remains the same, no change in the price. Price is 10 as is shown here in the schedule, but the quantity changes from 30 to 20. So this is called leftward shift or decrease. And what all cases could it have? Means when the income of the consumer falls, again for normal goods. Otherwise happens for the inferior goods. And then the price of substitute goods decreases, price of complementary goods increases when tastes and preferences are against, and when something is expected to be, the availability is expected to rise in the future. So we'll hold it today and we'll just shift it for tomorrow. Right? So this way, the movement along the demand curve and shift in the demand curve is the most important and essential component of any paper, right? So it can be asked in any format. Means if movement is asked, it means you have to talk about both the phenomenons, contraction, expansion, increase, decrease simultaneously. But when one of these is asked, it means like extension versus increase. So you have to give how do you define it? What is the example? Supplement it with the schedule and curve that would give you full on full marks. Right. Similarly, contraction and decrease. Right. These three things. I'll give you the price and quantity. Let me make the schedule for you. So contraction. When does contraction happen? When the price rises from 10 to 15, the quantity would fall from 30 to 20 because there is a rise in the price. But when the prices remain the same, 10 and 10, still the quantity is moving from 30 to 20. So this is the example of decrease. How do we show it diagrammatically? Price line remains this only. The first demand curve is this and the other demand curve is this because we have to show it decrease. So the quantity changes from this side to this side. Okay. But when we talk about this contraction, contraction means at this point of time, the quantity is demanded this much, but quantity reduces as the price rises. So my demand curve is this, and you have to show it with the upward movement. With this, we are done with the topic of movement and shift. The cross price effect. Cross price effect is very interesting phenomena. What does it state? That say there are two commodities X and Y. When the prices of X change, the quantity demanded of Y changes. So how do we see this in the real life? It happens with respect to the related goods, means the substitute or the complementary goods. So let's explain how the demand of a commodity in relation to price of substitute good behaves. We have seen that substitutes show the same direction. Means how do we show it pictorially? In this diagram, it's very much clear we're talking about the substitute goods, tea and coffee. So here, irrespective of constant prices of tea, the demand of tea is increasing from K1 to K2 or T1 to T2. Why? Because the prices of coffee have risen. Hence, it has led to the quantity demanded of tea also increased, right? And the opposite happens when the prices of coffee fall, the demand or the quantity demanded of tea false. Why? Because when coffee becomes cheaper, some people, those who used to have tea before, switch to coffee and it becomes relatively cheaper. On a very similar note, we have demand of a commodity in relation to the price of complementary goods. So car and petrol, let's have the same. So here in this case, we are talking about the demand of cars when the prices of petrol rise. So when prices of petrol are rising, it becomes expensive for the car drivers to maintain that car and to run that car, right? So the quantity demanded of cars would fall. So this fall in the quantity of car is on account of, the price of petrol. Increase in the price of petrol. And when the prices of petrol fall, the quantity demanded of car rises, right? When we have to show a rise, we show it with the rightward shift. When we have to show a fall, we show it with the leftward shift, right? And the price of that very commodity which we're talking about remains constant. So relationship between income and demand. We now talk about the normal and inferior goods. As I talked about, normal goods behave in the simple manner. Increase in income means increase in the demand of normal goods. Decrease in the income means decrease in the demand of normal goods. So A to B happens when the income increases. A to C happens means demand is reduced when income is decreased. But when we talk about inferior goods have negative income effect. Inferior goods we are using because maybe it's a compromise and we don't afford the normal good now, right? Now that the income is increased, what would we do? We will switch from inferior to normal. So with rise in the income, the quantity demanded of inferior goods would fall. And with the fall in the income, the quantity of inferior goods would rise, right? So this is showcased here. So when the quantity is increasing, it means there is a fall in the income. And the quantity is reducing, it means there is a rise in the income. Impact of taste and preferences, very simple. In expected direction, we have rightward shift when the tastes are in favor, and we have leftward shift when the tastes are against the trend, right? With this, we have tried giving you the detailed explanation pictorially as well, along with the schedules of all the factors affecting demand. If you have any doubts, any problems, do revert. And your comments and queries are awaited. God bless. See ya.